All right, so it's going live. All right. Let's see if we're on. Oh, we're on. All right, this is cool. Okay, so as people start getting on, this is awesome. So we're using Zoom, totally new platform. And this is going to be, as always, an experience, an adventure, and just bear with us, everyone. Apparently, there's a 20-second delay. So for all your questions, please hang in there, and Ashley and myself will get back to you as soon as we can. So yeah, we'll just hang out for a little bit more, and as people start to join us. So yeah, I mean, I feel like that now today there's a lot of conversation about what's happening next, and a lot of questions about, is school going to even reopen in the fall?
Yeah.
And it's just to be here during this experience, this whole time of unknown.
It is. I mean, it's unprecedented in the fact that, you know, at least in our lifetimes and our families' lifetimes, I mean, you had the flu pandemic back in the late teens and the early 1920s, but we haven't experienced anything since then. We're not trained for this. We don't know how to handle this.
Right.
It's crazy.
Right. Yeah, it's yeah, but you know what? That's why Facebook is so amazing, because we're all a community and we're all in this together here. So, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about. Cool. So why don't we get started at 7 o'clock? And yes, everyone, surprise, our special guest is Ashley Sullivan Roberts. She is an awesome person. She is a wife, a mother, she's an advocate, and she's a professional contract negotiator. And how fitting is this in our conversation on how do we communicate to those who don't understand how we learn. And this is a conversation that I have a lot with parents and with kids, students, young adults, and just being misunderstood, and how do we get this across. So Ashley, I wanted to just give the floor to you, and we'll just get in conversation. If you want to just reintroduce yourself and share what's going on.
Well, you're very sweet. Thank you very much. You know, I'm like most parents. I got in this. I am not learning challenged myself. I got into this because I have the most amazing child on the planet walking around, and he just happens to be dyslexic and dysgraphic on top of it. And I like to call him my white rabbit, and I'm Alice in Wonderland, and he took me by the hand and he pulled me into this world. The funny thing was, we were watching Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland just the other day, and I said, "Did you know I called you my white rabbit?" And he was like, "Ugh, mother."
So has it been challenging though to when you're dealing with the schools and with dyslexia and all of that? What has that experience been for you? How's that impacted you?
I usually refer to it as an evolution. There's such a steep learning curve, especially for people that, you know, don't normally or didn't come up in this world, because I wasn't born with dyslexia or anything like that. As a parent, there's so much lingo, there's so much edge of apple, there's so many things, from diagnostic reports to the terminology itself to that, you know, then you start talking about the science of all of it, fMRI scans, just there's so much that you have to learn. There's so much language, and it's intimidating. And I think I come at it from a very interesting perspective because of what I do for a living. And so because I've always done contract negotiations, and written contracts. I mean, negotiation is how I make my living. That's how I keep, contribute to my family, keeping a roof over our head. But I sort of fit into this world because you throw me into a conference room and I'm in my arena and people start talking. Well, we talk about digraphs and diphthongs and your son can and can't do. And I'm sitting there going, please.
You know nothing.
Yeah.
No
This
way.
is not how this is going to go. You are not
Right.
going to talk to me like that. You are going to talk to me in a way that I understand, and we're going to go from there.
Right. So like, how has that impacted, bringing your profession into your personal life with school and with negotiating with schools? Has that helped? And what are some tips that you can share with our community?
It's actually helped a lot. First off, I learned to be a negotiator in the oil and gas world.
Wow.
And so, I'm negotiating contracts and deals that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars at a time. And you're in there with various personalities, and being a woman in the oil and gas world, that also adds a very interesting dynamic. And so I would go into certain meetings with men who wouldn't even look at me, or with men who are talking to me in a certain way, or various situations where I'm the unknown because I'm the woman and I'm negotiating and I'm in a room that nobody's kind of expecting me to be in. And so I learned against some very dynamic and interesting personalities, I'll put it that way, how to sit there and be just full out insulted to your face and sit there and turn around and laugh at people. And
but to keep your composure, I mean, that must take a lot, and having a sense of being misunderstood. It relates perfectly to what our kids are dealing with in school and parents that are fighting the school systems.
It is. It's honestly, one of my two favorite negotiations that I ever did was actually a vice president from the Halliburton organization came to my office to tell me how things were going to go. This man dripped power and wealth and privilege. And he sat across the table from myself and a colleague of mine. And he was turned kind of away from us. And it was his body language, and it was how it was just oozing out of him. And my colleague and I were doing everything we could to just not die laughing.
Because it must have been too good. I have the image in my head. I have it. It's right there.
It was, he's in his Brooks Brothers coat, and he probably showed up in his 7-figure car, and just, it was just one of those things you just almost can't even write it. It was so good. We're just sitting there going, he didn't win the contract, because we were like, no, you're not going to walk in here and tell us how this is going to go. That's not how this works. So the interesting thing to me is I go into these school meetings, right? And I'm sitting across from these people who are intentionally trying to intimidate me. And I'm just almost going, you're barking up the wrong tree, buddy, because I am not intimidated by you.
So, I mean, I think you bring up a really interesting point there, because how do you not be intimidated? We have these parents and students approaching authority figures, people of power.
You do.
And we want to get what we want. For parents, these are our kids we're dealing with, our babies. And for the students, these are our grades. This is college, maybe. This is even maybe going to a new school, a chance to get a scholarship in something. And the teachers and the schools, they have that. So how do you take the emotion of all of this, put it aside, and have a conversation with authority, and that can enroll them and empower them to see what you're saying?
So there's a few things. There's a few very key distinct things in what you just said. The first one, and I think that I'm really kind of like an oddball in this. I don't see them as a position of authority.
Oh,
I don't.
ooh, all right.
Unfortunately, and I've said this rather publicly, we are conditioned from the age of 5 years old to see school as a figure of authority equal to that of our parents. It's a hardcore conditioning. You know, you enter kindergarten at 5. You don't graduate from high school until you're 18. If you go on to college, it's the same type of dynamic. You know, if you argue with your professors, you might fail your class, even if you perform.
Happens. It almost happened to me in college.
Almost happened to me too. I actually dared her to fail me in front of the entire class. But
I was the teacher's worst nightmare also. So.
Yeah. But I don't see them as a figure of authority because at the end of the day, that's my child.
Right.
And because that's my child, that is a child from my body. In my case, if it was an adopted child, that's still my child. I'm legally and financially responsible for that child. Given certain crimes that he can commit, I can go to jail for that child. Why does anybody get to tell me what does and doesn't happen with my child? Just because my child walks through the front doors of that school does not mean that I abdicate my authority as the parent over that child.
Right.
So no, I do not see them as a position of authority.
Do you see that in all of when you're in negotiations with everyone? Is that how you have to come in at it?
Absolutely.
Right.
I see them as a supposed position of authority. And maybe that's one of the things that I do very quickly in most of the school-based negotiations that I do is I tell them, I don't just come out and go, by the way, I don't see you as a position of authority, but I go, I'm the parent, I'm calling the shots. This is how this is going to go.
Now, do you just say that blatantly?
I have.
So then how can we tell a parent that's maybe new to this or someone that is dealing with something traumatizing right now during COVID-19 and the schools aren't giving or not wanting to meet with them because of their IEPs and they're stalling, or how do we go about this in a way that can get what we want, but also recognize what the school is also dealing with?
So I think that's a great question because yes, I go in there and I go, I'm the parent, this is my child, I'm going to call the shots. But I don't go in there from any perspective of disrespect. Because in a negotiation, whether you're negotiating for your child, whether you're negotiating for a car, whether you're negotiating for a $700 million pipeline, it doesn't matter. Everybody that's sitting around that table wants to feel like they're winning. And so a lot of people from a negotiation standpoint want to talk about the win-win. As a negotiator, I'm going to go, regardless of what I'm negotiating for, as a negotiator, I'm going to go into every negotiation that I have in my head, at least with a list of things. I'm going to ask for these 10 things. 6 of them, honestly, I can throw them away. I don't care. But 4, I want the 4. Ooh. But I'm going to go in with 6 because I'm going to give you 6. I'm going to gift that to you so that you feel like you're winning something. I'm going to fight for it so you feel like I'm fighting for it. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go, you know what? You're right. You can have that.
Right. That's a good move. And I know that when I love negotiation as well. When I was in school, I went from being in the business school to communication because I believe communication is the most important skill to know. Just look at what we're doing in the dyslexia world and trying to advocate for our kids in policy. That's a communication barrier right there with policymakers and what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, you were going to mention something?
So sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's okay.
I took it. The interesting thing was when I worked for one particular oil and gas company, they made everybody that worked around contracts take a class. And it was like I think it was like a 3-day class. It was like an all-day thing. You know, God forbid I have all this work, but I have to go sit in this conference room for 3 days. And we had to take this test. And the funny thing about it was like we had land guys, in there, and these are the guys that like are making the deal. You own a piece of land. We want to drill a well on your land. That guy is going to negotiate your rights as the landowner for generations to come. So we've got the land guys in there. We've got the sourcing people in there. And for some reason, we had an administrative assistant in there too. So there's like 30 of us. And they give us all this test. And if you landed on like this end of the spectrum, then you were hardcore. You win at all costs. There's no compromise. There's absolutely nothing. You're in it for the blood. You're going to win. Then you have the people on this end of the spectrum that they're going to give you anything you want. Please stop picking on them. I landed dead center with one of my sourcing colleagues. The benefit of that is that you can see both sides of the equation. You can see the hardcore side and you can see the give away the farm side.
Right.
So it makes you a better negotiator because you can truly see both sides. And so you can sort of kind of dance back and forth as you need to in order to play the game.
Mm.
All of the land guys ended up over here. The administrative assistant ended all the way up over here. I felt so bad for her. And the sourcing people, we were mostly clustered around the center, but it was myself and one of my favorite colleagues of all time, a gentleman named Harry, and we both landed dead center, 1 point off from each other.
Wow.
And so that particular experience, because I had never gone up against somebody who was like, they're going to win at all costs. And to kind of have that experience with them, I was like, yeah, I don't want to negotiate with you because the only way you're going to win is if I'm like stomped and bloody on the ground, dead at the end of this. And no, there's no fighting with those people. But the thing to remember about negotiation is, and this is one of the hardest things to do. When I do it for work, not having any emotion is the easiest thing in the world to do.
Right.
Advocating for my child, checking my emotion is one of the most difficult things to do that I've ever done. But to be successful, I have to divorce myself of that emotion before I go into that meeting.
Does that take work? How do you do
that? I usually start several days beforehand, and it's something that I've learned how to do. It's kind of a disassociative tactic that I have. My family doesn't like it very much because like the night before, I'm usually not very pleasant to be around because I'm like, yeah, I don't care, whatever.
I think you have to do that. You put up a protection, and for parents watching this is important because when you're in a negotiation, that's what this is. Or let's take it back a notch. Okay. You may not be negotiating your IEP, but you're just in a conversation with a teacher, a family member, right, who's very traditional, or a friend. And we just had a parent that commented that was talking about another perspective, which is from a teacher's perspective to the parents, trying to explain that your child has dyslexia and the parents are rejecting it.
Yes.
Okay. So, and that's like another angle of, again, a frustration from a teacher or a tutor or a dyslexic advocate, or what I do with my mentor kids with parents having to explain that your child isn't this super different kid that is just going to be forgotten, but they have dyslexia.
But that's an emotional reaction. If you think about it, denial is emotion. All denial is deeply seated in emotion, whether it's hardcore wired from something that you've experienced your entire life, some sort of cultural expectation, whatever it is, denial is emotion. One of the hardest things to do for some, in business, it's easy. People, I work for a company, the people I'm sitting across the table work for a company, at the end of the day, we're talking about our paycheck. We're not talking about our children. When you're in an IEP meeting, what you're talking about is your child. As a parent, I mean, you almost can't get more personal with that. You know, I remember that my sister said to me right before I had my son, she said, this is going to be a very different experience for you, knowing that a part of your heart is going to be removed from your body and placed in this little human being. And he's going to run
I
around
have
with his
chills.
heart
I have
in him.
chills.
Yeah, for the rest of your life. And I told him that. And the sweetest thing he's ever said to me, I think he was like 4, he said, Mommy, if they take an x-ray of your heart, will they see where God took part of your heart and made my heart with it? And I was just like, oh my God.
Oh my goodness. You're absolutely
But that's what it is. And then as a parent, your child is struggling and you have to go in there. And if you accept the dyslexia, you're having to fight for services. Or if you want to deny the existence of dyslexia, you're having to deal with your own deep-seated emotion for whatever basis that has, whether it's cultural, whether it's fear, whether it's whatever it can possibly be. So from either side, you have to find a way to communicate with the other person that doesn't involve emotion. And I say that, but as a negotiator, one of the core things I do is I want to trigger emotion in you. Because if I can trigger your emotion, I own you.
right. Yeah, I think, you know, this is cool because we could talk about both sides here, because I have an experience of talking from the LD kid in student in school to the teachers or to peers or to, you know, friends that don't understand.
Right.
How does a student communicate that? And for me, what I found, especially when it came to talking to professors, and I may have my perspective maybe a little bit different than yours, because I'm coming from all right, this teacher's a human being. I get that they're overwhelmed and they got whatever's going on and what they're used to, and people don't like change, and we learn differently. That is definition of change, and you have to be able to adapt, and a lot of times that's difficult for people. So I come in there and I'm like, all right, teacher, I know in my head, I'm like, my goal is I want to win them over so that I can have a successful semester, but also this person is going to understand how I learn.
And be your champion.
And be my champion, correct. And I can tell you time after time, I've had some of the worst teachers, Ray, my professor, I mean, they made kids cry. I have my best relationships with them because seriously, I have my best, they loved me.
Yeah.
Because I took the time and I'm like, all right, I got to meet with this teacher, humanize myself. And a great strategy, guys, is that I do whenever I'm in a meeting, one-on-one in an office or with a teacher, is I look for something personal, whether it's a picture, I'll look for them biking, or I look for something. If there's a picture of like a wooden souvenir, I'm sure they travel. So whatever it is, I ask a question about something that's not related to school. And what that does is that shows I'm interested in you. I want to know, tell me, why did you get involved in teaching in the first place?
Yeah.
It's a hard job.
It is a hard job. And, you know, one of the primary things about negotiation is there's so many different pieces and there's so many different tactics, and it depends upon the situation, the environment, right, the personalities,
right.
I have literally walked into meetings and pushed people's buttons to specifically shove them into emotional reactions so I could confirm what I thought about them.
Right. Right.
I've done one where
here we go. Brace yourselves.
I did this. So I'm like the calm one, and you know, you're also friends with Enid, and she did a meeting with me once, and she called me when it was over, and she said, "I don't know who you are. That was a different person." That person was terrifying because I'm calm. I don't have emotional reactions.
Right.
I don't respond immediately. I pause. I think. I consider. I watch body language. I see not just what is their mouth saying to me, what is their body saying to me, because they might go, Mrs. Roberts, we're not going to do that. And I'm going, you didn't want to say that to me.
Yeah. But by the way, I think that's really good to point out, because when there's emotion, there's a level of empathy, and we have to have empathy because these are human beings we're dealing with. But at the same time, again, this happens all over the country. This is like a war that we're in, and we have to put on our game face and say, okay, what's at stake here? My kid's education.
And that's what I did. Was I went into one particular meeting where I made everybody, everything is really contentious at this point. I'm not getting along with his teachers. They don't like me. Everything is highly contentious. It's just this, despite all of my tactics that I do. And I'm friendly. I shake hands. I give hugs. I bring food. I don't yell. I don't swear. I'm one even level all of the time.
Right. I think that's good to show too. That's really important.
It is. But I went into one, I felt like we were only doing this. And the problem was I didn't know how to break through this any other way. And so I did something that I've never done before. And I went into one meeting and I made everybody close their notebooks and close their computers and shove everything away from them.
All right, I'm doing it. All right.
Yep. And I said, close your eyes. Take 3 very deep cleansing breaths and count to 10. And when you're ready, open your eyes. But don't open your eyes as Mr. Sussman. Open your eyes as Jake. Your heart's in a different place now.
Yeah.
And I said, my son didn't ask to be dyslexic. And if you ask him at the end of the day, he doesn't want to be dyslexic. He just wants to be him. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be having these meetings. I don't want to be fighting for his educational rights. I'd rather be hanging with my girlfriends or with my family or playing with my dogs or doing anything other than being here. You don't want to be here. You want to do what you want to do. You got into education for altruistic purposes. You care about children. You want to help children. You didn't do it for the money. God knows you didn't do it for the money.
Unfortunately, because teachers should get paid more.
Correct. And that's what I immediately followed it up with, as well as education should be one of the highest paid professions that exist. But at the end of the day, we're all here for reasons that have to do with our emotions and with our hearts. So can we set the politics aside and talk to each other as human beings? As Ashley, as Jake. I went around the table and I named each person by their first name instead of calling myself Mrs. Roberts or Ms., Mr., Mr. I said, we are each here as individuals. And at the end of the day, this is a child who deserves to be educated, who wants to be educated, who loves education, who likes the challenge. He wants to grow up and yesterday it was a veterinarian and today it's an astronomer, but it all has to do with math because he loves math. So can we not find a way as human beings to connect with each other on enough of a level to hear the other side? We don't have to agree, but we have to at least hear each other. And if we can hear each other, we can find a way through this to what is in the best interest of the child. This is the best meeting I've ever had.
Can I say, like, listening to you do that, first of all, by closing my eyes, it's funny because I'm reflecting back on how my energy before I just did that. I was fired up. I was ready to let's get excited. And that's me anyway. For those who know me know that I'm very passionate. Yeah. But once I did that, it's funny. I bonded with little Jake.
Yep.
I bonded with myself.
You did.
I was able to show up here with you.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing else mattered. I even forgot we were doing a live video. Hey guys, how you doing? Watching us? But I think what was very powerful what you did, and for those watching, I really hope you're taking notes on this. First of all, this video is going to be saved, but at the same time, what you did was you got on their level, put yourself in their shoes, you humanized it. And I think that's what's so important, because we can go in just to tear up a storm, but at the end of the day, is it the priority is for our child, and maybe coming in at that angle isn't effective anymore, because these teachers are dealing with 20 other parents that probably are doing the same thing. So what you did was you were like, guys, we're human.
Right.
Who talks like that? Someone that's thinking, someone that's it's a strategic way of communicating. And honestly, that is the best way. And my best conversations when I used to work for another this other startup, my best sales, my biggest closes happen when I was just like, think about your family.
Yeah.
Think about your kids. And it's uncomfortable. You're like almost crossing a line, but at the same time, you're getting real, because like I think COVID-19 is a great lesson for this, because I believe that human beings won't change unless something affects their everyday lifestyle.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing for the first time, I mean, World War II wasn't even like this. For the first time, school stopped. During World War II, the school was still going on. For the first time, school stopped. And this is allowing parents to bond with their kids, to not just see the end results, but they're seeing the everyday. It's allowing teachers to reconnect with their communication tactics to their students. I'm seeing both sides of the aisle. I'm confident, I'm optimistic, and I know that there's parents, and you just had a similar experience with the schools, you know, the IEPs, and with COVID-19. And you know, if you're open to sharing that, we can talk about it, because I'm sure there's parents dealing with the same thing right now. But I think that right before something great happens, there's going to be a lot of resistance. And this is what we're seeing now.
There is. And one of the primary things to remember is something that Benjamin Franklin said, which is justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. Right now, so I have a blog, and I won't say the name of the blog, but I have a blog. And around this particular meeting, I wrote a 4-piece part that I called Crossing the Chasm. And I said that parents are on one side of the chasm and education is on the other. And what I mean when I say education is, I mean education is the establishment, not the individuals.
That's important I think that's really good. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah.
Yes. And I feel like teachers are unfortunately garroted on the outside of the stronghold that is education, so that they're the ones that receive the slings and the arrows from the parents, or at least it's perceived that they're the ones receiving the slings and the arrows from the parents. And a lot of the teachers out there, frankly, are abused by parents. But for those parents that are fighting for LD, there needs to be an understanding that the parent is coming from an extraordinary place of emotion, because you have this piece of your heart that's walking around that you know is brilliant, that you know is capable, that you know can do all these absolutely amazing things. But for some reason, you're the only person that believes in this child. And you're having to send them to an institution that doesn't care. And I've even been bold enough lately to say that education feels that dyslexia is a cognitive disability that cannot be overcome, when we know the exact opposite, and science proves the exact opposite. And we really need teachers on the sides of parents and parents on the sides of teachers, because it's united through parents and teachers that we will change the educational establishment.
Right.
But we have to connect in our hearts and in our minds and to what's important to us. Teachers are there for the kids. Parents are there for their children. So why can we not remove the barriers between teachers and parents and come together as one? when that happens, oh my God, can you imagine?
Yeah.
But it's just, you know, that's a chasm that as of right now, I don't know how to cross that chasm. I've done my best with the educators that I know that my child has had over his years of education to connect with them. And some of them have welcomed me. Most of them have rejected me, despite what I've tried to do. I donate to their classrooms. I buy from their wish list. Of the most amazing parent. Teacher presents. I give spa packages. I give Kendra Scott.
You do it all, and right, and they're still
right. But I'm the bad guy. I'm the one that's in there going, I don't like how you're teaching my child, and I want more.
right.
And despite all of my tactics being positive, I believe, you know, it's still a barrier, and COVID is creating an enormous situation for parents. I'm having to deal with a temporary termination of my son's IEP due to COVID, which is against IDEA, which is federal law. And so right now I'm trying to figure out what to even respond with at the moment, because I view all of this too as a chessboard, and they made a move and now it's my move and I haven't moved yet. Because again, I pause, I don't react, I respond.
Boom. That is a big one right there.
Right. Because if I reacted, it would not have been a positive thing.
Right.
If I respond, I'm calculating.
Right.
And, you know, we said, so in our dyslexia coffee talks, we had one a couple of weeks ago with one of our co-founders for the Dyslexia Initiative, Julie McKinley. And one of the things we talked about is, you know, you get blindsided, table. You don't have to agree to everything right then and there. Every time I'm blindsided, I table instantaneously. I'm like, this meeting's over. I'm not going to respond to that right now. This meeting's over. I need time to take that information that you've just given me and go home and research and read and reflect before I respond.
I think that is a great point, because the meeting doesn't have, nothing has to be solved in that meeting, although we want it to. This may be a long game.
Yeah,
so if you know something, if you're told something that you don't know, it's okay. You're saying it's okay to say, we need to pause this. I have to, let's reschedule this meeting.
Correct. And one thing too, and you know, you and I were kind of talking about this offline, is my son is finishing elementary school. For a year now, he's participated in these IEP meetings, these ARD meetings, these, in Texas, we call it ARD. So admission, review, and dismissal for his individual.
We're in Texas?
Huh?
We're in Texas?
I'm in Houston.
Okay.
So, but for a year now, I've made him participate. From the get-go, I have, you know, before he ever even like started school, I try to help him like find his words. He's upset. Okay, what are you upset about? Are you sad or are you mad? Let's talk about it. When he gets mad at me, I'm like, you can be mad at me. It's okay to be mad at mommy, but you have to tell mommy what mommy did. You can't be mean to me because you're mad at me. You have to talk to me. And he's becoming this really amazing communicator. But I started bringing him into these meetings, and he sits there for 3 hours and listens to these meetings. And he makes the most amazing observations, but he understands what's happening, and he's learning to speak for himself.
Yes.
And he's learning from me how to communicate within these meetings. And so he can go, this doesn't work for me, and this is why this doesn't work for me, and this is what I need to help me with this particular, because this isn't working.
Right. And that what you're doing, and this is you're such a role model, because yeah. I advocate for this with the students that I mentor. This is like my biggest thing is get the kids involved, get your kids involved, because what happens, parent-teacher conferences, it's a great example. What happens during parent-teacher conferences? Mom and dad go talk with the teacher. Teacher says a bunch of stuff. Mom and dad hear it, and they'll become the messenger. But if the kids join on these conversations, the parents become the facilitator.
Right.
Because whose education is it? Not the parents, it's the kids. And
Correct.
what that's teaching them is how to be comfortable with authority.
Correct.
How do you be comfortable? It's not about being rude. It's about sharing, actually, not just giving, but also receiving constructive feedback. Okay.
Correct.
And you have the choice to respond versus react, which
Correct.
is the biggest, most important lesson, I think, of all. If you want to know how to communicate to those who don't understand, you have to learn how to respond and not react, because the reaction is an impulse. It's an impulse.
Reaction is emotion, and that emotion can be the wrong.
Yes, absolutely. That is like dun, 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 dun. So
100%.
Wow.
But two, and I should say the person that I am was very much shaped by who my parents are. And when I was a very young child, I had a very loud experience, I should say, in my elementary school, where my mom threw a wall-eyed conniption fit. She didn't lose her emotion. She kept her cool, but man, was that woman angry. And she walked into my classroom and took me by the hand, and we left, and we never went back.
That's what happened to me.
Yep. And, I know I was 8 when that happened. And to watch my mom like go toe to toe with the principal when I was 8 years old and my mom win, that was an overwhelming example for an 8-year-old. And I should say I'm the youngest of 3 children, and I'm a lot younger than my brother and sister. So I kind of had 4 parents growing up. So my brother and sister get a real big kick out of what I do, because they're like, you are so not a person who does conflict. So we think it's hysterical that you go and fight people all the time and you get paid for it. So but she created that example for me. And I'm hoping that because I'm standing up to them, and I tell my son frequently, 1, this place does not get to define you. Nobody gets to define you. Who you are going to be is not going to be decided for you, is not going to be judged for you in these formative ages of 5 to 18. When you're my age, none of this even matters anymore. A couple of years out of high school, none of this even matters anymore. Nobody cares.
Right.
This does not decide who you are and who you can be as an adult. But 2, I'm the boss. I'm mom. And until you don't live under my roof, it's my rules, not theirs, mine. So I'm the end all be all authority figure. And if I say that this is not going to happen, this isn't going to happen. That's kind of bit me a little bit, because he's looked at his teachers a couple of times and go, well, I'm just going to tell my mom, and she's going to call you and tell you I don't have to do this.
So you have to do it in pieces, because there's a level, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
a lot of his dad in him, so he's totally willing to just go out there and go, my mom's going to say no.
Yeah, I think that's something else. And I want to just highlight again, for those of you guys watching, we're not here to bash teachers.
Absolutely
right?
not.
We are not here to bash teachers. This is very important. We're not here to bash teachers. Okay.
Teachers are amazing.
Because teachers, absolute teachers they are amazing. And there is reports left and right that's coming back saying teachers today in our school systems are reporting more levels of being overworked, being stressed than ever before. At the same time, students are reporting the same thing. It's a disaster.
It is.
So what we're saying here is that it's important to remember you have options.
Right.
Okay? And when we want to communicate, how do you communicate powerfully? We communicate powerfully by 1, we get on their level.
Right.
We acknowledge their struggle. We say, look, I know it's frustrating. You must have 20 other parents like me, but banging on your door. And you must think that this is, say what they're thinking. It's all right. Say what they're thinking, because I'll bet they're probably thinking it. Okay. And number 2, once we've identified that, now we can have a real conversation because we already de-escalated it. They're thinking you're coming at them like you're yelling at them. It's their fault. Guess what? It's like the customer service rep. You know, like we're yelling at the customer service rep. It's not like their fault. It's the company's fault.
Right.
So let's think about it like that. The teachers are like customer service rep, and they have a very important responsibility. In fact, teachers have one of the most important responsibilities because they are responsible. Their superpower is to inspire the next generation, our kids. All right. So we get on the level, we acknowledge them. And then we say, look, what can we do to be a team? How can we be a team? And not just me as the parent, but also me, I'm the student. So my child, Ashley as the parent. Okay. So now we're bringing them in.
Right.
We're bringing them in. Then we can go to the school. If it's the principal. Okay. They have a superintendent that's on their, that's banging on their door too. So they got a boss and the superintendent's got a boss. Okay. So each one has a level. Okay. And there is a way to communicate to them because they're not a robot. They're human beings. Human beings have emotion. Human beings, they want to feel seen. They want to feel heard. They want to feel valued. Thank you. Yep. They want to feel valued. So this is how we're going to show up with them. We're going to recognize this. We're going to recognize them. And then from there, we're going to have a strong, powerful conversation about our kids and not just ask for their help, but also say, what can I do for you?
Correct. Think about this additional point. Balanced literacy controls the educational establishment. In our universities across the country, balanced literacy is what our teachers are taught. We as dyslexia advocates are coming at the community, coming at education going science of reading, science of reading, science of reading, science of reading, So you've got science of reading and you've got balanced literacy. There is no gray area in between. You have two camps, right? One of the primary things, and this struck me kind of powerfully at some point this past year. How would you like it if somebody started talking to you with no respect for your education? You've taken the trouble to go to university, whether you've paid for it or your family's paid for it or student loans or however that happened. You went to the trouble to go to university and earn a degree and graduate. That is something that each of us with college degrees take an immense amount of pride in because that was hard earned for a lot of us, right? You're in a position where that education is being attacked because it's a balanced literacy education. And you got an entire community coming at you going, science of reading is the only way to go. So not only are you coming at them from the point of view of nobody's helping my kid, please help my kid. I mean, what do I have to do to get you to help my kid, to connect with my kid, to, my kid needs help, to I'm telling you all these things and I want all these things, but they are 100% against absolutely everything that you were educated about. So I'm telling you that you're wrong. You're going to automatically engender an emotional response out of somebody that is defensive in nature. As a negotiator, if I'm dealing with somebody that is defensive, they're going to emotionally shut down. Once they emotionally shut down, it doesn't matter if I hand them $10 million in cash, tax-free, right then and there. They're not going to hear me. They can't feel attacked. They have to be our allies. I don't want to say that challenge is 100% on parents because it's not. It isn't. It's not the parents' responsibility to go in there and create the allies and fight for their children at the same time. We also need the teachers to show up in enough of a way to understand that we're not the enemy, that we can be the ally. We have to mutually cross the divide together. It's not the responsibility of one side or the other. We have to do it together.
All right. I like that. If you guys are on board with that watching this, we got to make this happen. I think one day, I see it, we're going to have 10,000 people actually, can we make it more? Can I make it more?
Yes.
We're going to have 10 million people in Washington, D.C. walking up to the Capitol, teachers and parents and students all holding hands.
It's my dream.
We are going to put an end to this because this is the next generation of America.
It is.
These are the next president of the United States. This is the next CEO of Facebook if Mark Zuckerberg decides to step down one day, right? So you know what? This is our future, guys.
It is.
So again, Ashley, thank you so much for joining. This was very last minute. I called Ashley probably 2 hours before this and was like, I have an idea. You got to get on this. And thank you for rallying. This was so much fun. And I feel like there's so much that we could talk about. And I am excited to see the comments. I'm going to stay on for a little bit and answer questions. And again, if you guys have any questions for Ashley, you can, how do you want our audience to reach out to you if they have follow-up questions?
I will go onto the video and I will try to answer as many questions as I can. They can also message me through our page, the Dyslexia Initiative, which is at Dyslexia Initiative on Facebook. I'm generally the person that responds to all of our messages, but we've got a few admins on our page, myself, my fellow co-founders, and a couple of additional editors. So it may be a variety of people, but if you want to talk to me specifically, all you have to say is, hey, Ashley, and I'll be sure that I'm the one that responds.
Okay, great. And for guys, if you have any questions for me, or if you are interested in the mentorship program that I was talking about earlier, I work with kids around the world to build self-confidence around the way they learn literally communication, which is what we're talking about. You can either message me directly on Facebook or visit my website, which is www.superpowerconsulting.com. All right. Thank you again for joining us, Ashley. This was awesome.
It's been my pleasure.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.